Okay. Hello and welcome to the Parsha class, Parsha Tzav 5783. And whether you're watching on Facebook, on Zoom, or live, welcome. And I hope we are able to gain from the learning of the Torah together. It's a very important Parsha, often skipped because it's usually during a busy time of the year, usually either Purim time or Pesach time. We learn Parshat Tzav. It's usually busy and it seems repetitive, and so what's the point of learning this Parsha? There's a lot of lessons to be learned from this Parsha, as you can probably see from the previous years of classes. We have 2 years of classes already on our Parshat Tzav playlist available on YouTube. But aside from that, hopefully we'll get some other insights today as well. Some people like a quick summary of the Parsha. There's really 2 parts. We deal with the beginning of the Parsha deals with some of the sacrifices not mentioned in the previous Parsha, and we'll talk about some of them in quite some detail today. And then the end of the Parsha really deals with more or less the inauguration of the kohanim, how they received the actual garments that they're to wear, how they were brought into the service, what sacrifices they had to make, etc. That's dealt with in the end of the Parsha. And honestly, we're not going to speak too much about that today, but we have, like as I said before, in previous years. So let's get right into the sources. Let me share that with you, unless you're live, in which case I can't share that with you. Sorry, not within my ability. We're going to look at. We're going to ask a common question, a question we've actually asked almost every year that we've studied this parsha. With so many answers, it's a fun question. So the parsha is called Tzav, which means command. From the word, it's the same root as the word mitzvah. It is the root of the word mitzvah, not the same root. It is the root for the word mitzvah. Mitzvah, tzav. Tzav is in there. Tzadi vav, right? So Hashem says to Moshe, Tzav et Aaron vet banav, command Aaron and his sons lemor, and say to them, Zot Torah ha'olah. This is the law of the olah. And part of the olah sacrifice, part of the olah ceremony, is that this is a burnt up offering, and after it's burnt up, it stays. You don't clean it up. You let it stay on the mizbeach until morning, while it's getting all completely burnt up into ash, right? And the fire on the mizbeach keeps on going. That's what the verse tells us. And the famous question that I was alluding to, the famous question that's brought up by almost every commentary, is why does it say Tzav et Aaron? Daber el Aaron is a much more popular phrase, and in fact, later on in this parsha, throughout, it's Vayomer Hashem el Moshe lemor, Daber el Aaron, speak to Aaron, etc., etc. And so the word Tzav, which means to command, it seems to be much more emphatic than just say to Aaron, command. It's like, make him do it, like command him, order him to do this. So it seems like a strange, very strong language. And of course, as I said, all the commentaries comment on it, maybe not all. Rashi famously says, he brings from the Midrash, from the Sifra, what does Rashi say? He says, Tzav et Aaron, command Aaron, ein tzav el lashon zeruz miyad uledorot. So the language of tzav, the language of command, implies a sort of zrizut, implies the need to do this quickly and efficiently, and to do it immediately, and for all generations, ledorot. Amar Rabbi Shimon gives another. Biyoter tzarich hakatuv lezares b'makom sheyesh bo chesron kis. And particularly, the word tzav is being used here because it's important to even push people a little more when they have something that they're going to lose. We're going to lose something. And of course, there's all kinds of commentary trying to explain what exactly it is that the kohanim are going to lose by doing this particular mitzvah. So one particular thing is, as opposed to the other sacrifices where the kohanim get food to eat or something, here, this is all burnt up. They don't get anything out of this. So they're just doing a lot of work and they're not getting anything out of it. So they need to be, as it is, they need to be sort of pushed. They need to be commanded to do it. That's the way Rashi is basically understood by most everybody. We're going to see that there's something very deep in this particular Rashi. We're going to look into the Mayan Beit HaShoeva, Rav Shimon Schwab, quotes this Rashi. Actually says in brackets, it's B'Shem Torah Kohanim, so that's a different midrash. Interesting. Hold on. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be Sifra. It doesn't say it's Sifra. Same thing? Oh, it's the same thing. Oh, good. All right, good to know. Ein Tzav Elaloshan Ziruz Miyad L'Dorot. I'm Rabbi Shimon, so he quotes the entire Rashi. About the Chisron Kis, Ad Kan Lashono. That's the quote from Rashi. V'tzarach biur be'ezet tzad yishtanu dorot v'acharonim harishonim sheyizkaku l'ziruz miyuchad. So, what does it mean that we're worried about generations, for future generations? I understand why you need to encourage me. Aaron could say, I understand why you need to encourage me to do this. I'm going to lose out. But what lesson is this supposed to teach for future generations? So he says, Nira Shabora Baruch Shemo, he's here al B'Yov Miyamot Olam Shekesheoskim Ba'avodat HaKarbonot Lo Yenichu Et HaIker V'Yizkaku B'Tefel. Ziku B'Tefel. Hashem, the Blessed One, wants to teach us a very important lesson about about when it comes to korbanot, to sacrifices, to take the important thing and not to drop what we might think is tougher, what we might think is not so important. She'ikar hakorbanot hu kavanat halev. The most important thing about a korban is kavana. Right? What your intention is. If you bring a korban, you bring a sin offering, but you don't really feel any regret for what you did, your korban is nothing. It's not. It doesn't count for anything. You have to do it all over again. Right? Kavana is that important. Shiyach puts bal korban lahitaher v'itkar. The whole idea of the korban is to somehow the person is going to. We talked about in last week's class. We talked about how the korban functions, what it actually does. So part of what it does, according to Rav Shimon Schwab, is that it brings tahara, it brings purity to the person who brings the korban. So we see the same thing. We see this kind of mistake. He's going to give a couple of examples. First, he's going to start with as early in history as you could possibly go. Cain, back in the beginning of literally the creation of the world, right? The son of Adam and Chava. So he killed his brother because of his misunderstanding of how a korban works, right? Achareisha is the pasuk says the Cain minchato lo shah. Hashem didn't accept his korban for whatever reason. And we've spoken about that in previous classes, obviously in Bereshit. Is here Yotzo? He wasn't careful about his yetzer. V'lo im tetev seis v'im lo tetev petach chatat roves. So he explains he made a mistake. He thought that the physicality of the korban was the main thing. He didn't really think about, he didn't really consider that really the most important thing about a korban is the intent that comes into it. And he says also, V'chein Shaul HaMelech, right? He was supposed to kill off all the animals. He's supposed to kill off Amalek and all the animals. We spoke about this just a few weeks ago, and he decided instead he's going to take the animals and bring them as a korban. He's going to give them to his men so they can bring korbanot to praise Hashem. And so Shmuel says to him, Hashem. Hashem doesn't want your sacrifices as much as he wants you to listen to him. He said, kill all the animals, not bring me some as a korban. You totally misunderstood. So again, it's very important in a korban to have kavanah, to have the right intent. And we have examples throughout history of people who had the wrong intent. And that's one of the things that this parsha, what we're trying to teach Aaron, is that your intent is very important. However, right? Let's skip to the next paragraph. Many, many years later, in the time of the Second Temple, Kibu Hamakrivin Tochachto Itbarach V'direi Nevi'im Ad Shegiu L'Svara Hafucha. In that time, they didn't listen to the prophets, and they had the exact opposite mistake. What's the exact opposite mistake? V'hainu she'im ha'ikar ha'kaban hu harhure ha'tshuva kavanat halev ma ichpat lo Yitbarach b'tzurat ha'korban. My nafkamina bein tzir muvchar lezakin mezuhan. So it didn't really matter what kind of a korban you brought, as long as you had the right intent. So then they changed the focus. They said, "Oh, intent is really important." You're right. Okay, fine. Intent is really important. So that's all I'm going to have. I'm going to have all the intent, and I'm not going to do the korban correctly. Uh-oh. No, you have to do it right. You have to do it exactly as you're told to do it. You have to have that zrizut to understand and appreciate that how you do the mitzvah is also important, not just the kavanah. I see this. I mean, I'm sure Rav Shimon Schwab saw this too. That's probably why he's writing this, is because when you think about it, you look at the world today. What you have is exactly this problem. You have some people who are doing the mitzvah sort of like half-heartedly, like I'm getting it done. I'm doing this mitzvah. All right, you want me to go to shul? Okay, fine, I'll go to shul. Right? Without kavanah, that's the problem. And other people are like, okay, I love Hashem. I love Hashem so much. I don't need to go to shul. He knows I love him, right? That sort of idea. So both are half right, right? You need both. You need to have the actual willingness to do the mitzvah and do it correctly. So whatever it is, the korban, the Shabbat, whatever it is, and at the same time, you also have to have the kavanah. You have to do it for the right reason and have the right intent when you do the mitzvah. It's a mitzvah tzrichim kavanah in many ways, especially when it comes to korbanot. Very true statement. Okay. The Ohr HaChaim on this parsha, on this verse, is intense. It's I don't know, it goes on for pages and pages. He has quite a bit to say on this parsha. And what I'd like to do today, if I may, and it doesn't look like anybody's going to stop me yet, but I'd like to focus on one part of his commentary. Now he deals with all the different issues in the parsha, why it's called Torah Ta'ola, why it says Tzav, a lot of things. But then towards the end, or actually it turns out not to be the end, he has an entire explanation of the next few verses, all in the level of remez, in the level of hinting. Now, the Torah does. The Torah has, besides all of the other codes that it has, there's different ways to interpret Torah. One of the ways to interpret Torah is through something called remez, which gives you sort of an ethical explanation of things through hinting. And here he's going to talk about how these parshiot actually hint to what's going to be when Mashiach comes. And since I get lots of questions sometimes yes, sometimes not. Sometimes people ask questions, but they don't really wait for the answer. What was that? All right. Anyway, so sometimes there's questions about what's going to be when Mashiach comes. So it's worth looking and seeing how he interprets that. Okay. U'b'derech remez timos kol parsha al galut ha'acharon she'anu bo. There is a way to read this parsha as talking about the final exile, the final galut that we are in. We're in it. This is where we are. L'nachamenu me'itzvo nafshenu. This is supposed to comfort our. First of all, the parsha itself, but certainly his commentary is meant to comfort our tortured souls. Why? Kikol ish Yisrael me'ana hinachim nafsho birot orech hagalut. Every single anybody with any kind of emotion about the state of the Jewish people throughout this time has got to be very uncomfortable about how long this galut has lasted. Nir lemi dome. So see what this can be compared to. The Mitzrayim arba meot. This is like the 400 years. Is it comparable to the 400 years that we were in Egypt, the Bavel Shivim, that we were in Babylonia for 70 years? Obviously not. This is much longer. Yachad arba meot v'shivim. Put together, that's 400 plus 70 is 470. That's nothing. And when the time he's writing this, the Galut already lasted 1,672 years. He wrote this about let me see he wrote this around about 250 years ago or so, 280 years ago, and so it's this galut has lasted a long time. Ma ayakel od. So how much longer can I keep hoping that this galut is going to be over soon? It seems like it's going to go on forever. Lo galut levad ele inu meha umot. Not only is it a difficult, not only is it a long galut, but we're getting smacked by the Gentile nations. We're getting hurt. So this is gonna, not only is it a long period of time, it's also a very difficult period of time. Every single nation in the world has somehow oppressed the Jews. Somehow. This is obviously, this can give you a bad thought. Which is going to be contrary to what it says in the pasuk in Mishlei. It says true speech is not the true speech is not proven by its length, right? And the false tongue, you'll see, it seems to be telling the truth. That's what you might start thinking. So that's why the Torah needs to warn us about what's really going to happen. So the one who sees everything that's going to be happening for generations, in other words, Hashem, is telling what's going to be. He wants Moshe to encourage the Jewish people, especially those people who learn Torah, like all of you. Why? Because there's a pasuk that says at the lips of the Kohen, when from what they're teaching, there's Aaron and his sons, they're going to teach generations what's going to be. So now let's get to the actual explanation. Now that he said that basically words of introduction about why it's important to learn this. Zot Torah Ta'ola. That's part of the verse we've read. right? Vayikra 6:2. This is the teaching of the Ola, which is the burnt up, the going up sacrifice, Ola, right? Amar Zot, L'ma'et kol ha'yonot, she'en kamoha Ola. This is trying to teach you that the word this, Zot, this, the word this is to exclude all other goings up, all other olas, all other travels up. Chazar perush mihu zot, and it's telling you what this is whom this is referring to. Amar hu haola kvar. This one, this is the one that's already been. This exile that we, in other words, the exile that already was the exile from Egypt. That one's already. That's the one that's already not like this one. The thief mi zot ola mina midbar. Who is ascending? Who is going up from the wilderness, from the midbar? Okay, so that's the hint. So in other words, it's not going to be that exile. It's another one. Al mokta al mizbeach. So it's on the fire on the mizbeach. That's the next part of the verse. What's that referring to? Hem shnei pratim sha'anu bahem. This teaches you the two pratim, the two characteristics that makes this one unique. That this makes this exile unique. First, that we're learning Torah, which is not true about all of the other. We learn in the Torah something that's not true about the other nations, right? We're learning Torah. So us being B'nai Torah, that's different than the other nations. And number two, right, because even if the other nations of the world are learning Torah, they're not learning Torah the way we do it, right? Where we focus as people who learn Torah all day long. That's what they're focused on. That's their profession, right? That's already one thing that makes us unique. And the second thing is shanu miusarim begalut v'yisarim bedalut. The second thing is that in this exile, many of us are suffering and many of us are poor. Keneged HaTorah Amar Al Mokta Nimshal Torah La'esh. The Torah says on the fire, because the Torah is compared to fire, and so we're on fire. We have the Torah, and on the other hand, we're suffering. This is what it says. This is what similar to what the rabbis say in the Gemara in Ta'anit, in the very beginning of the Gemara in Ta'anit. There, Hai tzubad mirabanan deratach oraita. That with the young scholars get angry. That's like they get on fire. Ukeneged hagalut v'anafav amar ala mizbeach. And with the exile and everything that's going on, we are on the altar. We're burning on the altar. Because all of this suffering that we're going through is just like the mizbeach, as a fire that offers some sort of a kapara, some sort of a forgiveness for the people who bring the korban. So too we, we're more or less burning on this mizbeach of this exile, we also are getting a kapara, we're getting a cleansing. And then the pasuk continues and tells us, this is because of two things. Our connection to Torah and the suffering, because of these two things, because of our suffering, because of our Torah, tiel yatenu miyuedet behaflagot mu'olot mishunim l'shevach shvach. So we are destined to get out of this exile, and we are praiseworthy. We deserve some sort of praise. Asher lo haya lo yeh, that has never happened, and it will never happen again. In other words, the Torah we're learning and the suffering that we're enduring from the Gentile nations is all part of the kapara process that's eventually going to bring Mashiach. As we see the next part, it says, Ve'er ad matai yu Yisrael keneged shnei devarim elu. the fact that this verse then explains that Jewish people are going to be in the situation because of these two things. In other words, the flame and the mizbeach. Kol halayla, whose man hagalud hanimshal lalayla. These flames, the korban ola is on the mizbeach all night. That's a reference to the fact that the night, which is a reference to galut, a reference to exile, the difficulties of exile. That's when this is going to happen. He continues. He says, I'm just going to skip a little bit here to he takes from the Zohar and from the Midrashim that there's these periods of time, 500-year periods, for instance, are considered a day, considered 24-hour period in terms of this verse. And so the korban that's on the mizbeach during the night, there's a half the day is night, half the day is day, right? Is daytime. So therefore, just like that, Galut is going to be is the same way. 500 years is exile, and then that's going to bring us to 500 years of the opposite of exile. That's when there's going to be an aliyah, the ola part of this verse, that we're going to see a Mashiach after that time. And it's talking about the fifth millennium, the sixth millennium. So that's one of the hints that's given to the whole idea that you might have probably have heard of, that we say that Mashiach is going to has to come by the year 6000 or so. That's what it's talking about. It's talking about the fact that if you measure out the time with this idea of 500 years as a day, then what you have is basically each one of the 1,000 years of human history equals half the time of 1,000 years. The 500 years are exile, 500 years are freedom, and so at the end of by the 6,000th year, we should have our final redemption. It's going to bring us to the end of the sixth day of creation, right? Which is also a reference to the coming of Mashiach. He says a lot more about this, by the way. There's what I have here in this Faria isn't even all of it, but just so you know, there's a lot to say, and God willing, in next year we'll hopefully revisit this topic and bring some more from the Orach Chaim. But I just want you to know that the reason I bring this up is because, like I said, a lot of people ask me questions about what's going to happen, or how do we know Mashiach is going to come? How do we know there is a Mashiach? These sorts of questions. It's important to know that it's a fundamental of Jewish faith that we have, that Mashiach is indeed going to come, and it's also important to remember that there's hints throughout the Torah to certain things that are going to happen in history, and this Parsha Tzav is no exception to that. Let's look at the next verse and see a beautiful idea that I think is very relevant, especially to those of you who are possibly cleaning right now for Pesach. I'm imagining some of you are doing that. And so there's a very important point in this week's Parsha about that. Lavasha Kohen Midovad, the Kohen is supposed to dress in special clothing, right? Mikle Sevad, in special pants. Yilbash al Basori is going to put on his body. Hirim et hadeshen, he's going to clean out the ashes. Asher tochal ha'esh, that the fire ate up. So basically, right, he had an offering on the mizbeach. The fire ate up the offering, left it in as ash, right? V'tochal ha'esh al et ha'ola al ha'mizbeach v'samo eitzel ha'mizbeach. And he's supposed to then take it and clean it off of the mizbeach. Rabbeinu Bachai points out, V'yanu b'kan she'av haram et hadeshen shehi avodat kala shricha bigdei kahuna. Even, look at this, even this minor task of cleaning off the ashes from the Mizbeach requires the Kohen to put on the special clothing. That's why the special clothing and the cleaning up of the ashes are in the same verse. You might think, okay, so he was dressed in the special clothing. It's supposed to be so awe-inspiring and beautiful. We talked about this in previous parshiot, right? And here he comes. He's doing the korbanot, or he's doing other services. Okay, but now it's cleanup time. So change into your sweats. I don't know. They didn't have sweats then. I get it. Right? They put on some apron. Fumigation mask or whatever, some gloves, and clean up the ashes. Ashes are difficult to clean up. It's messy, right? No. This too is a mitzvah. A mitzvah kala. It might be considered a minor mitzvah, but it's still a mitzvah. Kimidovad hu hakatonet. Amar lashon mido mitche. So it goes into the lashon, into the language. So he's supposed to have this clothing on his skin because the emphasis is on the fact that whatever mess he's going to make isn't going to go on his skin, it's going to go on this clothing. And you might think, hey, listen, let's take off the special clothing, right? No. That's the opposite of the point. He says, no. Says the Rabbeinu Bachai, he needs to put on the special clothing now because that's the whole emphasis. Even minor mitzvah, a mitzvah isn't measured by how pretty it is. A mitzvah isn't measured by how glorious, the honors you're going to get for doing it, etc. A mitzvah is measured by the fact that Hashem told you to do it. There's a tzav, there's a tziva, there's a mitzvah. You have to do it, and once you have to do it, now you can dress up for it. That doesn't mean I'm not saying you should put on your your Shabbat clothing to do your Pesach cleaning. Don't get me wrong, but just because it's Pesach cleaning doesn't mean it's not a chash of a mitzvah. It says in the Gemara, it's brought down also in Shulchan Aruch and Halacha that even great people are supposed to prepare for Shabbat somehow. It gave examples in the Gemara. Different rabbis would do certain things, that chop up the logs, or they'd cook something, they'd clean something, whatever it is. A minor task, a menial. Let's call it what it is. It's a menial task, right? Cleaning is not, during the year, the president of the United States does not vacuum the floor, right?
Scrubbing the toilet.
Maybe or clean the toilet, right? Or any of those sorts of things, right? So there's the help to go do that, right? There's nothing wrong with getting help to do cleaning. I'm not saying that, but it's also important to be somehow physically involved in this quote unquote menial task. And that's a very important lesson in this week's parsha, that these menial tasks of cleaning the dust, cleaning the ash of the Mizbeach is such a menial task, but at the same time, still a mitzvah. How do you know? Because the Kohen has to get dressed up for it. Again, I'm not saying that's the halacha that you get dressed up to clean. Don't get me wrong. But understand that what you're doing when you're cleaning is a mitzvah. It's a completely different kind of cleaning you'll have, right? It's true. A lot of the Pesach cleaning ends up being spring cleaning, and that's questionably a mitzvah. But if you're actually looking for chametz, trying to make sure all your chametz is in one place that you're going to sell or you're going to eat or whatever else, eat and sell, whatever. All right, so, before Pesach, right? So that's a mitzvah. And while you're doing the mitzvah, understand, have appreciation, have the kavanah for the beautiful mitzvah you're doing, even though it might be ordinarily a menial task. Okay, we have some major essays here today. We had the Orach Chaim, Rav Schwab, Rabbeinu Bachai. Let's see what else we can get to in the time I have remaining. Class might end a little early. I apologize, but like I said, we've got plenty of other classes that you can see from previous years. All right. Okay. This is another beautiful major piece from the Kli Yakar on this week's parsha. Pasuk says, yeah, there's a verse in this week's parsha, 6:21. It has a very important lesson. Talks about a Kli Cheres, an earthenware vessel, right? And it says there, Kli Cheres asher tevushal bo, if you cooked, right? One second. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a sin offering. Right? A sin offering. And it says, V'chol kli cheres, asher tevushal bo, any earthenware vessel that you cooked that sin offering in, right? Because right. So we'll explain this in a moment. So that you cook the sin offering in this earthenware vessel. You shaver. You have to break it. Bima kli nechoshet. If it was a metal pot, copper, right? Bushla umorak v'shutaf b'mayim. Then you have to clean it and cook the pot. Basically, burn the pot with and rinse it with water. That's how you make it. That's how you purify it. Rashi there says and yishaver, it has to be broken. Why? Lefi shahablia. All right. We locked the door. All right. Okay. So all right. So the earthenware vessel that you cook this in has to be broken. Why? Because of the blia, because of the absorption, the shenivlat bo, that was absorbed into it. In other words, you cooked meat in it, and it was from a sacrifice, and it was sacrificial meat that you cooked in this pot. And then it could be that some of the taste, some of the juices of the meat were absorbed into this pot. Therefore, nasa notar. You might have made it into notar. What's notar? Okay. Notar is meat that was used for an offering that has been that hasn't been eaten in the time that it has to be eaten in. Right? You cooked. You're allowed to eat the offering on the day that you brought the offering, but after the day, then you're in most cases you're not allowed to eat it anymore, and therefore, if you cooked whatever was absorbed into the pot, that is part of the offering that you can't eat anymore. So then you have a problem. You basically trafed up that pot with meat juice or whatever that is no longer able to be eaten. So what do you do? So of course, if it's a metal vessel, you can kosher it. And if it's a earthenware vessel, you have to destroy it. That's what Rashi says here. And this is the same rule for all kachim, for all korbanot, not just the chatat, not only the sin offering, but any offering that has any kind of limitation of when you can eat it, and that's all kachim, all sacrificial meat. Therefore, this is the rule for everything. So that's Rashi. So the question that Kli Yakar asks is, right? He brings this Rashi, and he focuses on those last few words. Hu hadin l'kol kachim. This is the rule for all kachim. So what's the question? What question is he going to ask? Mikol makom hadavar tzarich biur lama katva haTorah din zeh davka gabe chatat habal kapara. if this is a lesson that's true for all kachim, then it doesn't make sense. I think that was good. The next one. It's green, right? Thank you. So if this is a lesson that's true for all kachim, for all holy sacrifices, then why do you have to tell me this rule specifically regarding a chatat, a sin offering? And says the Kli Yakar, this has to do with kapara. Kfi hapshat nucha lomar lefi shatorah ha'eda al kli cheresh ena yotze midei defiv leolam. So obviously that a kli cheres, an earthenware vessel, needs to be destroyed, so it wouldn't be used ever again. And it says it's dafka bekachim kalim nechalim lebet yamim layla achat. So right, I said some sacrifices have to be within that day. Some sacrifices have you have a little bit more time to do it in 2 days and 1 night, right? Like a hotel stay, right? 2 days, 1 night. Layla achat shemachal mitakev b'kedera zman rav. Alkein hu bola kol kach harbe. It's going to be very absorbed into it if you don't kosher it out. Aval kosher kadoshim she'ein nechalim kol Liyom echad halayla echad. No, Chaf Aleph. Ki'im. Oh, Ki'im. Sorry. Ki'im Liyom echad. Layla echad. I'm trying to find what I'm trying to say here. Okay. Oh, so that was okay. Here's the main point. Val tzad haremes. So this is what I really wanted to focus. He gave an explanation to why it was specifically with a chatat, because a chatat is a different kind of level of holiness where you have more time to eat it, etc. So, but when it comes to the remez, on the level of getting some ethical lesson out of this, there's another lesson to be learned. Shetaharat hakelim yesh lahem dimyon taharat hachote hamakriv chatat. This whole purging of a vessel has some similarity to the purity that a person can get from cleansing oneself of sin. Ki kamo shakelim yesh mehem shebluim harbe min ha'isur v'lo yochel etzeit al yedei shtifa ve'in lahem tekana kuli alma ki'im b'shvira. Ki'im b'shvira. So so similarly, just like a earthenware vessel that has absorbed something improper in it, it's not easy to cleanse that. You can't just put it in fire and clean it, because earthenware vessels have a particular nature where each single piece of it, because it's very porous, each single grain that makes up the earthenware vessel absorbs some of the unallowed thing, right? The disallowed item. So therefore, our teshuvah is like that as well. Each of us, when we make a mistake, it seeps into every single piece of us, every single atom of our bodies, every single atom of our soul is affected by our mistake. Of our sin, call it, right? And so therefore, just putting us in fire, quote unquote, obviously don't try this at home, right? just putting us in fire isn't going to get the sin out of us. We need to break ourselves. Just like an earthenware vessel needs to be broken, so to our kach yesh lecha adam chotev bole harbe min ha'isur kasher lo la'azov ha'hergel ve'ein lo takana. He's not going to get he's not going to get fixed just by burning. You're going to actually have to. He's going to have to break himself. He's going to have to look into his deeds and look into his or her behavior and fix them. Each and every piece of us is affected by what we do, and then to fix that, we need to really break into who we are and change who we are, change our nature, change into something new. Just like a kli cheres, an earthenware vessel, is no longer an earthenware vessel once it breaks. It's still a vessel of something. Paperweight or whatever. It's no longer a pot, right? Once it's broken, it's going to be something else. So too we need to become new people. We need to be renewed by our behavior once this kind of thing happens to us, if we really want to do proper teshuva. It's one of the lessons of this parsha. It's also one of the lessons of Pesach in general, and I think it's a very important lesson for all of us in our different situations in life. I'll keep the source sheet up here. I've sent it to you in your email, and I hope that this has helped you at least a little bit with your Pesach preparations. There's a lot of connecting things, a lot of parallel themes with Pesach in general, besides the cleaning and the menial task issue. We've talked about it before, but also the whole idea of cleaning. We're not just cleaning a house. We're cleaning ourselves. We're making ourselves into this new, renewed sort of person that's greater and closer to Hashem. And God willing, this will give you something to be working towards in the coming weeks. Parsha class, God willing, will resume after Pesach. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you. It was very special how you related it to this week's parsha, to right now in this week's parsha with the cleaning, because it's very
apropos, right?
Very cleaning
All right,
right now.
clean well.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.